You think you can just do whatever you want? Ma'am, I have every right to be here.
A white woman stood in the middle of the university courtyard, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her voice was sharp, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. She doesn't belong here, she hissed into the receiver. Suspicious. Loitering. I don't feel safe. All eyes turned toward the young black woman sitting quietly on a bench, laptop open, books scattered around her. Her name was Nia Carter, a straight-A student on a full academic scholarship. Today, she was just trying to get ahead on an assignment. But to the woman dialing campus security, Nia's very presence was a threat. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared, walking with heavy steps across the courtyard. Students began pulling out their phones, sensing something ugly was about to unfold. Miss, one of the guards barked, we've had a report about you. Can we see your student ID? Nia's chest tightened, but she stayed calm. She knew her rights. Slowly, she closed her laptop and reached for her wallet. Of course, but may I ask why? The woman who had made the call stood smugly a few feet away, arms crossed. See, I told you. She's probably trespassing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some students shook their heads. Others muttered under their breath. Everyone knew what this was. Racial profiling, plain and simple. But what nobody knew, not even the security guards, was that Nia wasn't just an ordinary student. She had a powerful connection that was about to flip the situation upside down. Because the moment security radioed in for backup, the person who showed up wasn't just another officer. It was her mother. And Nia's mother wasn't just anyone. She was the newly appointed dean of students and a former civil rights attorney. The courtyard was about to witness a lesson that would never be forgotten. The young black student, Aaliyah, stood frozen as the white woman jabbed her finger toward her. Security, over here. This girl doesn't belong here. I've seen her loitering, the woman barked, her voice loud enough to draw curious glances from passers-by. Aaliyah's chest tightened. She clutched her laptop against her hoodie, the very same laptop with the school crest sticker on it, proof she was a student here. Yet instead of looking at the evidence, the woman glared as if Aaliyah's very presence was a crime. Within minutes, 2 campus security guards appeared, jogging across the courtyard. Their radios crackled as they scanned the scene. The woman, emboldened, crossed her arms. There she is, she hissed. She doesn't belong here. I demand you remove her immediately. Aaliyah tried to speak calmly. I'm a student here. My ID is right here in my bag. But before she could reach in, one guard raised a hand. Ma'am, we need you to keep your hands visible. A ripple of fear passed through Aaliyah. She had heard too many stories that started this way and ended horribly. Students watching nearby began to record the scene with their phones, the quiet hum of whispers spreading. The white woman smirked, convinced she had won. And then, a commanding voice rang out from across the courtyard. Is there a problem here? Everyone turned. Striding toward the group was a tall black woman in a tailored suit, her ID badge clipped prominently on her blazer. The air shifted the moment she appeared. She wasn't just faculty. She wasn't just administration. It was Dr. Naomi Ellis, the dean of students and one of the most respected figures on campus. The crowd parted as she approached. She locked eyes with the security guards first. Why? She asked slowly. Are my officers detaining one of our students? The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Dean Ellis, we received a call about suspicious behavior. This young lady, Dean Ellis cut them off sharply. Her name is Aaliyah James. She's a scholarship student, top of her class, and she doesn't owe anyone an explanation for sitting in her own campus courtyard. The white woman blinked in disbelief. You mean, she actually goes here? Dean Ellis turned, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. Yes, and I suggest you consider what made you assume otherwise. The woman stammered. I was just trying to keep the campus safe. From what? A black student studying on a bench. Dean Ellis's voice carried across the courtyard, echoing so everyone could hear. Do you know how many times students of color are harassed, not for what they've done, but simply for who they are? That ends today. A murmur of agreement spread through the watching crowd. Some students lowered their phones, no longer just recording an incident, but recording a moment of justice. Aaliyah's heart swelled as she watched the dean step closer, her presence unwavering. Security, Dean Ellis said firmly, you may stand down. And as for you, she turned back to the woman, consider this your warning. We do not tolerate racial profiling on this campus. Not from students, not from staff, not from anyone. The woman's face flushed deep red as the reality sank in. She backed away under the weight of dozens of staring eyes, her power dissolving into humiliation. Dean Ellis placed a steady hand on Aaliyah's shoulder. You don't owe anyone an apology. You belong here. More than she ever will. Aaliyah's throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. She had never felt so seen, so defended. The dean gave a final glance at the crowd. Let this be clear. Our campus will not stand for injustice. Every student deserves dignity and safety. And if anyone doubts that, she paused, her voice thunderous, they'll answer to me. The courtyard erupted in applause. Some students cheered. Others hugged Aaliyah. In that single moment, the entire campus witnessed more than a confrontation. They witnessed a turning point. The white woman disappeared, swallowed by her own shame. But Aaliyah stood taller than ever before, her spirit unshaken, her pride burning brighter than the sun. And from that day on, no one questioned whether she belonged, because she had proven with courage, grace, and the unshakable support of her dean that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The quad grew quieter, but not because people lost interest, because everyone was watching. The campus security officer, tall and broad-shouldered, scanned the scene with a serious expression. The white woman, suddenly emboldened again, stepped forward. There, she pointed, her fingers shaking as she directed his gaze at the black student. That's the one. She doesn't belong here. She was yelling and being disruptive. I don't feel safe with her around. The crowd murmured. Several students shook their heads in disbelief. Some even pulled out their phones to record. The young black student, Maya, stood tall, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her chin lifted with quiet strength. I do belong here, Maya said firmly, her voice steady though her heart raced. I'm a student. I was working on my sociology project until she decided my existence was suspicious. The officer's eyes narrowed, studying her with calm professionalism. He glanced at Maya's ID card in her hand, then turned slowly toward the woman. What exactly did she do to make you feel unsafe? He asked. The woman sputtered. I already told you. She was standing here, loitering. She was looking around, suspiciously. I thought she might be casing the area, or stealing. The crowd gasped audibly. Someone muttered, she was just reading. Another whispered, this is ridiculous. The officer looked down at Maya's notebook, which was still open on the bench. The words systemic racism in everyday life were boldly written across the top of her paper. He raised an eyebrow, then looked back at the woman. So he said slowly, you called security on a student who was doing her homework. Maya didn't flinch. She crossed her arms. This is exactly what my project is about. Microaggressions, profiling, people assuming I don't belong. The crowd leaned in. Students began to murmur louder now, voices rippling through the quad. She's right. This happens all the time. We see it. The woman's face reddened. This is absurd. I have every right to feel unsafe. The officer interrupted her, his voice firm. Ma'am, feeling uncomfortable because someone doesn't look like you isn't the same as being unsafe. We don't tolerate false reports here. The students erupted in applause. Maya's heart thumped in her chest, a mix of relief and power. She hadn't expected support like this, but it felt like the entire campus had her back in that moment. The officer turned to Maya. I apologize that your study session was disrupted. Do you want me to file an incident report on this call? Maya glanced around. Dozens of phones were recording, capturing every second. She thought of her mother, her professors, the generations before her who had endured worse without witnesses. She gave a small nod. Yes, I think this needs to be documented. The officer nodded. Then let's sit down together after this. I'll make sure it's handled properly. The woman's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. I'm the one who called you. And you abused that privilege, the officer said flatly. This campus is for everyone. You don't get to weaponize security against students because of your bias. The crowd cheered louder now, clapping. Some even shouting, "Tell her." "And stand strong, Maya." Maya exhaled slowly. For the first time all day, she allowed herself a small smile. The fear and frustration in her chest melted into something else, a quiet, unshakable pride. And as the woman huffed and stormed away, muttering under her breath, the students closed in around Maya, not to intimidate, but to uplift. Some hugged her, others patted her back, and more than a few whispered, "You inspired us today." But Maya wasn't finished yet. She stood back on the bench, raising her notebook like a banner. Her voice rang out across the quad. "This," she said, "is why we must keep speaking out. This is why I'm writing my project. Because if silence is comfort for the privileged, then our voices are survival for the rest of us." The crowd roared again, the sound echoing across campus buildings like a wave. For the first time, Maya didn't feel like just a student, she felt like a leader. And she knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The security officer, a tall man with calm eyes, stepped closer. He scanned the scene, Melissa pointing, her voice sharp, and Aaliyah clutching her books, her jaw set but her eyes flickering with unease. The officer didn't rush. He observed. And then, in a firm but measured tone, he asked Melissa, "Ma'am, can you tell me exactly what suspicious activity you saw the student doing?" Melissa faltered. She hadn't expected the question to turn back on her. Her hand fluttered toward Aaliyah as though pointing at her very presence was enough. She was lingering by the building, looking around like she was up to something. You know, like those kids who don't belong here. The officer's gaze sharpened, shifting to Melissa with an intensity that made her step back. Aaliyah stood silent, her dignity wrapped around her like armor, waiting to see if the truth would finally hold weight. The officer crouched slightly, speaking directly to Aaliyah. "Miss, can I see your student ID?" Aaliyah reached into her bag, her hand steady, and handed over the card. Her name, photo, and the university crest gleamed under the light. The officer checked it carefully, then looked up at her with a nod of recognition. "Thank you, Miss Johnson. Everything's in order." Then his expression shifted. He turned to Melissa, his voice carrying a deeper authority. "Ma'am, she's a registered student here. Top honors program. You've just accused her of suspicious behavior with no evidence whatsoever." Melissa sputtered, trying to defend herself. "I was only trying to keep the campus safe. You don't know what it's like. Anyone could be—" The officer cut her off sharply. "No, ma'am. What I do know is that false reports like this waste valuable resources and humiliate innocent people. What you did wasn't about safety, it was about prejudice." Gasps rose from the students nearby. Some had pulled out their phones, recording everything. Aaliyah's story wasn't just hers anymore, it was becoming a message. The officer then turned back to Aaliyah, his tone softening. "Miss Johnson, I apologize for the way you've been treated today. You've done absolutely nothing wrong." For the first time since the confrontation began, Aaliyah let out a slow breath. Her voice, calm yet powerful, rang out so that everyone could hear. "This is what we go through, being questioned, doubted, accused, for simply existing in spaces we've earned the right to be in. But let this moment stand as proof. I will not shrink, and I will not be silenced." The crowd murmured in agreement. A few clapped, and Melissa, suddenly aware of how the scene had turned, tried to retreat. But the officer stopped her. "Ma'am, I'll need you to file a written statement for this incident. And just so you know, false accusations can carry serious consequences." Melissa's face paled. She stammered excuses, but the damage was done. The students' phones had captured everything, and the truth was undeniable. Aaliyah stood taller than before, her books in her arms like weapons of resilience. She didn't just walk away, she walked forward, each step echoing louder than Melissa's retreat. And the campus? It would remember this day, not as the day a black student was shamed, but the day she stood unbreakable, turning bias into a lesson that no one could ignore. The murmurs around the crowd grew louder as people began filming on their phones, catching every word and every facial expression. Maya stood firm, her voice steady yet filled with conviction. You assumed I didn't belong here because of the color of my skin. You labeled me a threat before you even knew my name. And now, you're being shown in front of everyone that your prejudice doesn't stand against the truth. The woman's face flushed red, and she tried to stammer out a defense. But it was too late. Eyes were on her, and the tide of judgment had shifted. The once silent students now clapped, some shouting words of encouragement. Speak your truth, Maya. Tell her. That's right, stand up. Maya turned toward the security officer, who looked more than a little embarrassed. Sir, I ask you, if I were anyone else, would I have been stopped, questioned, or threatened with removal? Or is it only because I'm black, because I'm a woman, that I was treated this way? The security guard's lips parted as if to answer, but no words came. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the crowd as murmurs of agreement rippled through them. Maya let the silence linger before continuing. This is not just about me. This is about every student who has been made to feel small, unwelcome, or unworthy. This is about every black woman who has walked into a space only to be questioned if she belonged. Today, I'm standing not just for myself, but for them too. The woman who had called security crossed her arms tightly, as if trying to shield herself from the weight of Maya's words. Yet the weight pressed on. The crowd's clapping grew louder, echoing across the courtyard. Suddenly, another voice cut through the noise, a professor stepping forward. Dr. Hamilton, one of the most respected figures on campus, spoke firmly. Maya Johnson is one of the brightest students we have. Her dedication, her intelligence, and her leadership speak louder than any baseless accusation. To question her place here is to question the very values this university claims to uphold. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya's heart swelled, not from pride, but from the overwhelming sense of justice finally breaking through. For the first time since the ordeal began, the woman who had made the call seemed to shrink under the gaze of accountability. She turned her head away, but the damage was done. Her prejudice had been exposed, and the entire campus had witnessed the truth. Maya raised her chin, her voice powerful as she declared, "We don't rise by tearing others down. We rise by lifting each other up." Today was an attempt to silence me, but instead, it gave me a platform to remind everyone watching that black women belong. We've always belonged, and no phone call will ever change that. The courtyard roared with cheers, the sound carrying beyond the campus gates. In that moment, Maya realized this wasn't just about her. It was about a movement, a reminder, a spark. And that spark had just been lit. The crowd's energy had shifted entirely. Students whispered to each other, exchanging looks that said, "Finally, someone stood up. Finally, justice is being seen." Maya's eyes scanned the courtyard. Every step she took carried authority, not just as a student, but as someone whose dignity had been challenged and proven unshakable. The white woman, now visibly trembling, tried to speak again, but the words caught in her throat. The security guards, standing rigidly beside her, exchanged uneasy glances. They had no words to defend the baseless accusation. Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of heels clicking on concrete echoed across the courtyard. Heads turned. A tall, commanding figure approached, a woman in a tailored blazer, radiating confidence and authority. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but cutting through the murmurs. "Is there a problem here?" The crowd parted as if they were watching royalty. The woman's presence demanded attention, respect, and obedience. This was Maya's mother, a renowned civil rights attorney who had fought countless cases of racial profiling and discrimination. Her reputation alone could silence a room, and today, she would not disappoint. The white woman stepped back instinctively. I was just trying to keep the campus safe," she stammered. The mother's eyes, sharp and unwavering, locked onto her. "Safe? You called security on a student studying on her own campus because of the color of her skin. That is not safety. That is prejudice, and it has consequences." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Students whispered, "Is that her mom, and she's a lawyer?" The mother continued, her tone deliberate and precise. "Let this be clear. Maya Johnson has every right to be here. She is a scholarship student, excelling academically, and no one has the authority to question her presence based on bias. What you attempted today is not only wrong, it's illegal under our campus code of conduct. The white woman's face went pale. Security guards shifted awkwardly. The campus had never seen authority wielded with such precision, intelligence, and moral clarity. Maya stepped forward, holding her books close. "I've been patient," she said, her voice strong. "I've stayed calm. But let this moment remind everyone watching. Prejudice cannot stand when truth, courage, and knowledge come together. We are not defined by assumptions. We are defined by our actions and our character." The mother added, "I will personally ensure this incident is documented, addressed, and corrected. And the student body will see that justice is not optional, it is required." The crowd erupted in applause, some students cheering, others recording every second. Cameras captured the white woman's stunned face, her authority evaporating before hundreds of witnesses. She had underestimated not just Maya, but her mother and the truth that had been waiting to be revealed. The courtyard was transformed. What started as an act of bias and fear had become a lesson in accountability, justice, and empowerment. Students would talk about this day for years, the day a young black woman was confronted, challenged, and vindicated in front of an entire campus. Maya's mother stepped beside her daughter. "You handled yourself with strength and intelligence. Remember, the world may try to underestimate you, but never let them. Your courage today will inspire others tomorrow." Maya smiled, the weight of injustice lifting, replaced by pride and determination. This moment wasn't just a victory, it was a legacy in motion. The courtyard had fallen into a mix of stunned silence and buzzing whispers. Students pulled out their phones, capturing every word and every expression. Social media notifications began to ping across campus. Someone had already started streaming live. The story was going to spread far beyond the quad. Maya's mother, the civil rights attorney, stood tall beside her. "Let me make this clear," she said, her voice steady, echoing off the surrounding buildings. "Bias and racial profiling have no place here or anywhere. Calling security on a student because of the color of her skin is unacceptable, and it carries consequences." The white woman's face drained of color. She looked around, realizing that she was now the center of the scrutiny of hundreds of witnesses, all recording, all watching. Her power had completely evaporated. A campus security supervisor arrived, alerted by the call. He approached cautiously, taking in the scene, the crowd, the streaming phones, and Maya standing with her mother beside her. "What's going on here?" he asked. Maya's mother didn't flinch. "This young woman, a scholarship student in your honors program, was harassed by this individual under false pretenses," she said, gesturing to the white woman. "Your officers responded appropriately, but it's your responsibility to ensure no student is treated this way again. I expect a full investigation and a formal apology issued immediately." The supervisor nodded, his expression grave. "Absolutely. We'll handle this properly." Meanwhile, Maya's classmates began surrounding her, offering words of support and solidarity. "You were amazing," one whispered. "We saw everything. You didn't back down." Another student said, "This will go viral. Everyone's going to know how wrong she was." Maya's eyes swept over the crowd, her chest swelling with pride and relief. The fear she had felt earlier was now replaced by a growing sense of purpose. She wasn't just defending herself. She was standing up for every student who had been silenced or judged unfairly. And then, as if on cue, the campus president arrived, summoned by multiple reports. He walked directly to Maya and her mother, nodding in recognition. "Dean Ellis," he said, acknowledging her authority. "I've been briefed on the incident. I want to personally commend both of you for your composure and for ensuring that justice is done." He turned to the white woman. "You will issue a written statement and attend mandatory training on bias, discrimination, and respect for all students. Our university does not tolerate this behavior in any form." The woman's jaw dropped. She muttered something, but no one paid attention. The crowd's energy was electric, cheering for Maya, for justice, and for the lesson that had been taught in real time. Maya raised her hand slightly, signaling for quiet. Thank you, everyone, she said. This isn't just about me. This is about making sure that no student feels unsafe, questioned, or discriminated against. And it's about reminding people that courage and truth can overcome fear and prejudice. Phones continued to record. The story began to spread across social media platforms, capturing national attention within hours. Journalists reached out, students shared clips, and the hashtag Justice for Maya began trending online. Even outside the campus, the story inspired conversations in workplaces, schools, and community organizations. People everywhere were discussing racial profiling, bias, and the courage it takes to stand up for what's right. Maya's mother squeezed her shoulder. Remember this feeling, she said softly. You faced injustice head-on, and you turned it into a lesson for the world. Today, you didn't just defend yourself, you sparked change. Maya looked around, seeing the students smiling, the campus staff nodding, and the woman who had tried to intimidate her now shrinking into her own humiliation. For the first time, she truly understood the power of truth, composure, and resilience. And as the crowd slowly dispersed, the lesson lingered. Campus security implemented new training programs. The university updated its policies. Students felt safer. And Maya, a single moment of bravery, had created waves of justice that reached far beyond her courtyard. The room was silent except for the shallow breaths of the white woman, still clinging to her excuse of feeling unsafe. Everyone's eyes now flicked between her and the dean, whose face had hardened. The dean stepped forward, his voice sharp as steel. Mrs. Whitaker, do you realize what you've done? You falsely accused a student, an outstanding student, of a crime solely based on the color of her skin. And to make matters worse, you weaponized security against her. The woman stammered, I was just trying to protect the children. No, the dean cut in, his tone firm. You were trying to protect your own prejudice. And today it backfired. The crowd murmured again, louder this time, a wave of agreement swelling through the parents. One mother in the front row stood up and said, This young woman was helping my daughter with her science project last week. She is kind, brilliant, and supportive. How dare you treat her like a criminal? Tears welled in the student's eyes as she glanced around the room, realizing she wasn't standing alone anymore. The dean turned back to her, softening his tone. On behalf of this institution, I deeply apologize for what you endured today. Not only will this incident be documented, but Mrs. Whitaker will be barred from campus activities until further notice. Discrimination has no place here. Gasps filled the air, some from shock, others from relief that justice was finally being spoken aloud. The white woman's face crumbled as she realized her power had slipped through her fingers. She tried to protest, but the security officers who had once been ready to escort the student out were now guiding her toward the exit. And then, as if scripted by fate, the student's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then looked up at the dean. My mother's on her way, she said quietly. Moments later, the heavy doors at the back of the hall swung open. A tall black woman in a sharp navy suit entered, her badge glinting in the overhead lights. She walked with the commanding presence of someone who had spent years in federal service. The dean's eyes widened. Agent Carter. The woman gave a curt nod. Yes, I'm Special Agent Carter with the FBI, and I'm also this young woman's mother. A hush fell over the room. The white woman, halfway out the door, froze in place. Agent Carter's gaze was ice cold as she turned to her. You thought you could bully my daughter because she's young, because she's black. You thought no one would stand up to you. But you were wrong. Today you didn't just pick on a student, you picked on the child of a federal agent. And let me assure you, I will be following up on every single one of your actions today. The entire hall erupted in applause. Parents, staff, even security, all clapping, some even cheering. The student's heart swelled as she turned toward her mother, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Agent Carter pulled her daughter into a protective hug, whispering so only she could hear, They'll never silence you. You belong here, and you will rise higher than they ever dreamed. The student smiled through her tears, finally feeling the weight of the day lift. She wasn't just a target, she was a survivor, a scholar, and the daughter of a woman who had spent her life dismantling injustice. As the applause thundered around them, one truth echoed louder than all the rest. Sometimes the ones you try to silence are backed by a force you never saw coming. And on this day, a white woman's false accusation was shattered by the undeniable power of truth, courage, and justice. If this story moved you, there are so many more waiting for you. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button to join us here on Dark Side of Luna. Together, we'll keep exposing injustice, uncovering hidden truths, and celebrating stories of resilience. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, and be the first to witness the next powerful story.